This is the story of a real woman. The opening line of the novella Woman at Point Zero by Nawal Saadawi tells you everything you need to know about it. Saadawi introduces us to Firdaus not by name or by profession or by what she has done, but by what Firdaus is at the end of the day. A woman, and everything that happens to her is because of and informed by that detail. While it sounds upsetting, don't forget that this is a story written in retrospect. This is the detail that the doctor deliberately chose to start the story with because she realizes through Firdaus' story that truly no other details matter for why she is in this position. Before anything else, Firdaus is a real, breathing woman, not a commodity and not a victim. This sets the stage for how we get into the story for the rest of the novella, never forgetting that she is a real woman, even though it takes a very long time before Firdaus herself can come to this conclusion. And this is because Firdaus, for a long time, was not her own person. This is a sentiment repeated throughout the novella, where her bodily autonomy is passed around to whoever holds the most power or money, depending on who you ask. Ere-Bestman and Adagogo's analysis is a compelling argument for the commodification of Firdaus's body. In their paper, The Commodification of the Body in Saadawi's Woman at Point Zero. They argue that her commodification started long before she was a prostitute, where her exploitation as a wife and daughter prevented her from having any control over the economy of her life. She gains control of the economy of her life by gaining control of her own finances, which, while providing a temporary source of empowerment, also become a source of strife for her. While the authors make a compelling argument for why the economy of Firdaus's life is deeply connected to monetary gain, I would like to expand this line of thinking by considering Firdaus not as an effigy of the patriarchy, but as a person who recognizes these injustices. She is constantly making negotiations within herself to understand where she sits in the world, until she makes the ultimate conclusion that living in this world just isn't for her. Instead, I want to argue that this commodification is not as simple as gaining control of the finances that offer her freedom, but instead ask what it means to be commodified. How did she come up with this process in the first place? And most importantly, why is it something that would matter to her? I would argue that the trauma that Firdaus faces manifests as the internalization of commodification, which is only alleviated by breaking down the mental and physical self into a literal and figurative nothing. The meaning of value shifts considerably throughout this novel, but for most of it, it is defined through the hegemonic values. Value as a woman is tied to what she provides for others. Because this is the definition of value for Firdaus, she for a very long time does not exist as her own being because she is so strongly tied to what everyone else asks of her. The first time she confronts this idea is through her first interaction with the mirror, where she does not recognize what she sees in it. Quote, "I was frightened when I found myself looking at the little girl wearing a dress that reached down no further than her knees and a pair of shoes that hid her feet." She does not recognize her own reflection, despite being a school-aged girl, and this is because she's never really had to. She was nurtured into a perpetual state of subservience, where her personhood was denied by emphasizing that she exists to serve others around her. All she had known was her name, which in turn was given to her by her parents, but aside from that, she was never really given anything else. This becomes a source of extreme discomfort for her, stating, quote, "I was filled with a deep hatred for the mirror. From that moment, I never looked into it again." Because why would she develop a relationship with herself at this point? All she's ever known is subservience, and this mirror challenges this idea by presenting her as her own idea, her own being. This is the first instance of Firdaus resisting the capacity to become her own person, instead retreating into the comfort, for lack of a better word, of what she has always known. She does not desire to challenge these ideas because then she would need to build herself up without anyone else, not on the terms of others. This indicates an internalization of commodification because her reflection makes her confront something that is very frightening to her, that she is her own person outside of others, that there is no one else in the mirror but her, and she does not like that. When Firdaus is finally willing to develop a sense of self, she clings to the definitions that others project onto her. Notably, Sharifa tells her, Quote, "Neither Bayumi nor any of his cronies realize your worth because you fail to value yourself highly enough. The higher you price yourself, the more he will realize what you are really worth." This single sentence causes irreparable damage to Firdaus's psyche. Here, Sharifa creates a very direct link between value and money, very bluntly stating that value is linked to what you price yourself at. Not your sex or your body, but you. By claiming that social value comes with a literal price, Firdaus internalizes this definition throughout the rest of the novella, up until really she slaps the prince, but we'll get to that part later. This definition of value internalizes her commodification because it reinforces the idea that she is worth whatever dollar amount. The idea is never challenged by those she is surrounded by and is in fact celebrated as she begins to indulge in it. Her first realization comes after she orders a meal for herself, and the waiter is, to the reader, acting like a normal waiter. There's no ulterior motives, no prying eyes, no under-the-table deals, he is just serving her food. But in this moment, Firdaus asks herself, quote, "Could it be that the 10-pound note I held in my hand was as illicit and forbidden as the thrill of sacrilegious pleasure?" She experiences her first respectful encounter because she can afford it, and throughout the novel she continues to afford these encounters. This is significant to her internalized commodification because she receives external validation for it beyond just getting the dollar amount. Now she is able to afford the luxuries that Sharifa boasted earlier for herself. She's seeing the direct impact of having money and being able to spend it. So long as she is making money, she is worthy of respect. Even when Dia challenges this by saying she's not a respectable woman, this very quickly shatters when she realizes that it doesn't really matter how you make the money. What matters is that you have it. Now, the logical conclusion to Firdaus accepting that she is nothing comes from her revelations before she goes back to prostitution. The very famous, "I hope for nothing, I want nothing, I fear nothing, I am free." Except this moment is a misdirect. She wants nothing to do with men. She still wants the value that comes along with being a prostitute. She does not explicitly define these wants, but they're still there. After she becomes a wealthy woman working a respectable job, both ideas of value that were shaped by her experiences with the previous wrongdoers of the novel, she still craves some sort of validation. Quote, "From then on, whenever I needed a dose of honor or fame, I only had to draw some money from the bank." While her sense of self-worth is no longer defined by how she uses her body, it is still deeply connected with being able to spend money on her terms. While this does provide a sense of freedom for Firdaus, it contorts her relationship with her value to being based on what she can buy. This directly contradicts that feeling, fearing, and wanting nothing, because we see what has happened when this is all challenged by Marzouk. Her sense of value shatters after the man takes it from her by controlling her income once again. The point when Firdaus truly embodies the nothingness she was boasting about pages prior is when she rips up the banknotes from the prince. Prior to this moment, Firdaus replaced her sense of worth with the amount in her bank account, highlighted by the fact that she even said yes to the prince in the first place. The interaction was brief, but she, the woman who claimed to want nothing, still sold her body for 3,000 pounds. When she rips up the banknotes, she truly becomes nothing because she is no longer bound by the value men assigned to her based on her commodification. Quote, "It was as though I was destroying all the money I ever held, ridding myself of them once and for all, removing every trace of their piastres on my fingers, tearing away the very flesh of my fingers to leave nothing but bone, ensuring that not a single vestige of these men would remain at all." The language in this quote is extremely significant because this is the first time Firdaus realizes the extent of the impact that these men have left on her. It wasn't just mental or psychological or physical, it was in every fiber of her being. Her skin, her blood, her flesh, all of it is deeply entangled with each man in her life. Ripping the banknotes is ripping each connection she had with those men, which is in turn ripping away parts of her being. This is when she begins to break down into the figurative and literal nothing that she was boasting about pages prior, where she truly realizes that the economy of her life is dictated not only by men, but also by their values, which is, at the end of the day, what they can buy and sell. We see that Firdaus finally begins to live on her own terms a page later, where she does not identify as a prostitute or a criminal anymore, acknowledging that these are labels assigned to her by the society she exists within. Quote, "I'm not a prostitute, but right from my early days, my father, my uncle, my husband, all of them taught me to grow up as a prostitute." By the end of the novella, Firdaus is not a commodity nor a victim. She proves herself to be a real woman, but not because she's willing to become a martyr for some grand cause, but because she dies because there is nothing left for her in this world. She is satiated in knowing the truth, and this truth is scary for everyone else but her. There is a literal and figurative nothing. She is nothing because there is nothing left for her. It's not a particularly happy ending by any means, but I honestly don't think that Firdaus would have wanted a happy ending. There was really no other way for this story to end. Firdaus had to die, but at the same time, it's not really a source of tragedy. All that I could imagine is that she would really just want it to be an ending, which is what it was.